And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore podcast, where we never sit out, except for CD, who was out for the last 10 days plus. Uh, just absolutely battle. Just know that he was battling in the trenches, just
We're
battling.
back. We are so back, and we cannot wait. We toughest schedules part 2 in 2024. You guys love the first segment. We thought we had some like teams we wanted to cover. A little group of 5 here, Nevada and UMass, but also some teams that are also looking for playoff contenders in their conferences. Yeah, we're very excited to get into these. I know it's early. I know it's early, but we still think about we got football coming. Spring football's right now. We got the summer recruiting months, crazy camp news and all that stuff, and then we'll get into obviously fall camp, which is right around the corner. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like the video. Stick around with us. We're growing very fast. We're loving the progress we're making right now, but we're also still hungry, still growing, still trying to do our best for you guys.
Yeah, and on that, you mentioned playoff contention. It feels like, I mean, there's 12 teams in the playoff now. Also, so I made a video, CD, when you weren't here, talked about the 14 team playoff that's being thrown around. That's just, waiting to get approved and kind of figuring out the details of that. Let's get a quick synopsis on your thoughts on a 14 team playoff versus a 12 team playoff. And there's different formats thrown out there, right? Like automatic bids, like three SEC teams, three Big Ten teams, two, one, and such and such. So what are your thoughts there?
I mean, in an ideal world, first of all, we're down to like 6 playoff teams. Okay. In an ideal world, obviously, beggars can't be choosers, but at 14, I don't love the automatic bid spots. I think you should. I I think that's a little unfair to just give the SEC and the Big Ten. I get it. I know that they're always going to have the 3 of the top, 14 teams, whatever, just about every year. But the reality is, like, I'm just trying to keep equity in college football, and I want to keep this great sport as close to it's been since I've known it as a little kid. And I think that's like the beginning of the end of some of the shifts that are happening with some conferences. And the reality is, selfishly, I don't want those to happen. And I get it's about money and all that stuff, but I don't love the automatic bids. I think it's gonna be fun. I love the ideas for the home games hosting playoff games. I think that should be an auto thing until the final game of the year. Maybe in the Rose Bowl or whatever it is. But also, I also want to preserve the sanctity of bowl season. Like I'm a guy that loves bowl season. We previewed every bowl
We
game.
love bowl season on this show. We just
We
love
love
it.
it. We previewed every game. We love bowl season, and we want to give it its thunder like it deserves.
Yeah, I'm with you on the auto bids. Like I get that you win your conference, you deserve a shot, right? Like if you were the best in your conference, you deserve at a chance to be the best, beat the best across the country, right?
Hmm.
Having three automatic bids, like first of all, if there wasn't already enough parity, the way that the money would be split up between the conferences, you know, yeah, let's just make the rich richer. All right, let's call for parity, right? By making this 14 team playoff and allowing everyone in, but then let's distribute more money to these larger conferences. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job. Good idea. And then, Charlie Baker's freaking out about all these NCAA prop bets. I don't know if you read into that at all. It's like
We
figure
have bigger
out
fish
your
to fry. We have bigger fish to fry.
there are
Okay,
so many bigger
than
fish to
college.
fry than whether or not Iowa's backups and punters and kickers or whatever are betting on their own props and games. Like,
Let me have prize picks. Let me have prize picks. And you're talking to a Big Ten guy, myself, and an SEC guy, and Matthew. Like this should be beneficial to us, but in reality, not beneficial to the entire scope of college football.
no, it's not. But I do like the idea of auto bids, meaning a singular bid for each
Yep,
conference.
I love that.
So, no, I'm not saying every single conference deserves a bid, right? I'm not saying that every
Oh,
G5.
well, no, we have a lot of G5 listeners on this program.
Look, look. All right. I mean, do we want this to be March Madness or do we want this to be
This is college football.
do we
This is
want this to be
different, man.
earned? It's like did okay, well let me ask you this. All right. And I understand the argument of if you're gonna let one conference have an auto bid, you let all of them have an auto bid, like
No,
every single one. But that's just that's not
for the record, I'm
realistic.
against that. First of all, real quick, because we're in March Madness, because this is March, right? like there's a difference between college basketball and college football, sport wise, and like ability to have an upset happen. And like you just get hot shooting threes. You only have 5 players on the field at once instead of 11, and then 22 players playing total, and then bench guys and all that stuff. Like you have to have depth. You have to have crazy talent to be able to overcome a massive, massive talent gap. And it's not that much. It's not as common in football, and which is why playing a ton of G5s in this program or in this college football playoff setting in the short term would just it would be slaughter, right? And I know, yes, some would happen. Some G5 schools, have a good amount of talent. SMU for one, right? They're getting to the ACC, and they'll show their strengths there. But yeah, I auto bid for certain conferences for sure, not for everyone. Not I don't want 14 auto. Let's stop with that. Okay, let's play the games. Let's have them matter.
Yeah,
Encourage
and people might be asking like, why do you not want to have multiple auto bids for every conference either? Like, why is that not okay? Well,
because
let me
the
tell you.
Michigan. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, yeah. Let me get to this. I think we're about to say the same thing. Why is it that the Michigan Ohio State game could possibly be played 3 weeks in a row? You play the end of the and then apparently the only one that matters is the third one. It's like then it don't mean anything. Like your Big Ten championship, if you have two auto bids, right? The top two teams, like to play in the conference championship, then your conference championship doesn't mean don't have a conference championship game. Don't have a conference championship game. And like we're gonna talk about Nevada's schedule later. Imagine if Nevada, right, goes 12-1 and their only losses to, Power Five team,
Minnesota.
Minnesota, and they're the highest rated G5 team, and they get an auto bid, right? But they played 13 games because they play Ohio, like Hawaii. And then imagine like now, is this at all realistic because of the state of Nevada's program? No. But say they go on a run and they make the national championship and then play the national championship. That means they've played in like what is that, an 18 game season? If you include the conference championship. So that'd be 14 for the conference championship and then four play. Dude, I just hate the hypocrisy of like these upper executives saying, "Oh, we're trying to protect the kids' safety, right? We're trying to protect these kids." It's like it's a hard job to ask. Like you're asking to protect these kids who are not getting paid for their services, up front by the universities and the conferences themselves, and you're asking them like you're trying to keep them safe and also save the sport at the same time and make it have a meaningful postseason, which I was under the understanding that it already had a meaningful postseason. I didn't understand that TV ratings necessarily correlated to the health of the sport. Uh, they do to some degree, but I don't think it's as important as
It's not. It's in current state, like in terms of like current popularity, yes, but in terms of future outlook on what's going to happen, current TV ratings mean nothing. Mean nothing.
yes, I agree, 100%. So
Real quick,
yeah, well,
can I
like
get it
figure
real
out
quick?
NIL, figure out transfer
Yeah.
portal, figure out other stuff. Like just stop tinkering with the playoffs. All right, I'm okay with 14. I'll let it happen, because I have to. But
Let me paint the picture here. Like Ryan Day, like is legit feeling pressure on the hot seat, and Ohio State fans are anxious. I live with one. I know it. Like Ohio State fan is very nervous, like about all this stuff because they lost to Michigan, and that game meant everything. And I know it's still going to mean something, in terms of that. But if they still backed away in the playoffs and won a couple games, like it'd be a much different story than missing out altogether. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And lastly, I do beg Greg Sankey and everyone else said it's the higher ups. Like I get it that like walking away from like 7 figures, 8 figures is hard to do. But we're talking about like $80 million versus like $60 million. Like, really, really, I get it. I know, like, but and I hate to like have the whole like I don't know. I just think like we're really arguing about going from $60 million to $80 million, for example, as what they're actually doing. And like I get it, like you're supposed to do your job to the best of your abilities, but in reality, like long term future of the sport, long term paychecks coming in. If you're Greg Sankey, I do think you need these other conferences to be competing with you to obviously make your product better.
yeah, absolutely, to some degree. So let's just get into schedules then. We've had our fit talking about that. We both share very similar opinions on all of that. I'm sure you
Mm-hmm.
in the comments section are gonna have your own opinions, or I'm sure you guys love the 14 team playoff. And you know what? It's actually gonna be awesome, probably. It's gonna have some amazing games, but let's hope that doesn't shake up the sport as we know it too much because we already love it as it is, you know. So, anyways, let's get into these toughest schedules in 2024, part two. Clemson. Why do we put Clemson on this list, CD?
Well, first of all, we talk about tough schedules. We first want to see tough out of conferences, and it doesn't get much
Yep.
tougher than playing Georgia, right? And then
Yep.
on top of that, you also have App State, who I get it. If you're not familiar with college football, like App State is scary to see on your out of conference schedule early in September. They are a killer. Ask Michigan, ask A&M, ask UNC, who's had about a dozen battles with them, right? Also, we talk about South Carolina staying in the Carolina area. South Carolina on the schedule, who has had Dabo's number, right? At times, him and Shane Beamer, and
It's a rivalry
obviously
game. Out of conference rivalry game.
never easy, never easy. And also, you talk about in conference, right? You have NC State, who a lot of people love going in this year in the ACC, right? And obviously we're big fans of Robert and I and that staff there, Dave Doran. At Florida State, I get it. Florida State might take a step down, but also like they're still gonna be pretty darn good. And you got to Tallahassee, right? And then you also have Louisville on that schedule at Vatech. It's not an easy schedule by Clemson standards at all. And obviously we talk about tough schedule in college football. They're gonna need to go 11-1, right? Win their conference to make this college football playoffs and to have a bye and to do all the things that they want to accomplish, get back to Dabo Swinney football.
Yeah, and look, you can look at the schedule, and obviously every schedule is relative, right? So this is all relative to an ACC schedule. Okay, so yeah, I know they play Stanford and they play Wake Forest and Virginia and Pitt. Okay, but that's not to neglect. Like, let's not neglect the rest of their schedule, man. Like you said, the out of conference, the Citadel. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But seriously, like the out of conference is pretty tough, and these are all some of the toughest teams in the ACC. And I don't know that there's tougher teams that you could draw. Maybe Miami. Miami would be the only tougher team that they didn't draw on their schedule that I could possibly think of. But yeah, and there's a lot of pressure on Dabo Swinney. Some are comparing him to John Calipari right now. Some are doing that. And I don't disagree with that. I heard it some folks in the back room in Tech Second Radio. I heard it on Cover 3 podcast. I heard it on another radio station. I saw it on Twitter. It's going around. That was Swinney. There's some pressure to win right now at Clemson. Garrett Riley. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now. You had 6 yards per attempt passing, 9.6 per completion, both in the bottom 10 nationally. I mean, that's not what you wanted. It's not what you wanted. You thought you had a quarterback. Maybe you do still. I don't know. I was never necessarily a believer from the start, but there's certainly some pressure to perform. Is it going to ride entirely on Phil Maffa's shoulders and this defense? I don't know. Are we going to see some youngins like Peter Woods rise up? I don't know. All I know is that relative to the ACC, this is a pretty tough schedule. And do I think that they can navigate it pretty decently? I do think so. I do think they'll be able to navigate it pretty decently, but there is pressure to win now.
Yeah, and my questions with Clemson right now is offensively, yes, we know that the spotlight is on Cade Klubnik and Garrett Wright, like you said. You're bringing in some pieces. You're getting Antonio Williams healthy. Tyler Brown comes back after a productive freshman year. You lose Will Shipley to the draft to a lot of. I saw a comparison to him to Reggie Bush. No, I don't know if that's necessarily true. College-wise production.
I saw the same one. That was dumb. That was a dumb
How
comparison.
they projected the pros, maybe it doesn't matter. Will Shipley was a very dynamic player for your offense when he wasn't fumbling the ball in key games. Phil Moff on the other Phil Maffa, Jake Springstall. Like, there's some talent there to be had. Hopefully, you figure out your line. You bring in Matt Luke, who's been, obviously a revelation on that offense side of the ball, recruiting wise already, but also hopefully instilling a culture back to where they had elite O linemen. To me, my question is with that defense side of the ball. You lose a lot of guys, in my opinion, in that secondary. Right, we talked about Andrew Makuba. We talked about him earlier in the year going over to Texas. That's a big get for Texas.
Nate
Tough
Wiggins
loss.
headed off to the NFL.
Nate Wiggins, Sheridan Jones, Xavier Thomas, obviously 5-star, never quite lived up to it, but still very good veteran piece that you're losing. I like their D-line. Yes, I like the young guys there. But Wes Goodwin and Mickey
Jeremiah Trotter.
Yeah. And you got a lot of guys to replace there. And yes, it's been different offensively, in the past couple of years, but defensively is to me where they used to have a massive advantage over guys. And ever since, they lost Uh, wow, I am blanking on his name. The D coordinator over at Oklahoma now.
Brent Venables.
Thank you, Brent Venables. My goodness, I'm getting back in there. I'm getting my feet back under me. But anyways, losing to me, that's where it's been, and I think the mentality has to change on that side of the ball as well. We'll see if it happens.
Yeah. How about Bo Collins? Losing to him at receiver.
Yeah. You're gonna
Uh,
know right away though, too. I mean, Georgia, if Georgia embarrasses you in week one, that's gonna sting. That's 2 straight years, right? 2 straight years of getting embarrassed by Duke last year, and then obviously Georgia, pummels you. Like, that's the people not gonna be
yeah.
happy with Dabo Swinney. They need to come out and make a statement there.
Yeah. Now you can lose week one by 40. I mean, you can add to Georgia, you can ask Oregon and still have a good season, right? You can do that. But
But I
I mean,
also think
it would nice to see hey, are you actually because Clemson, they should be as talented as Georgia, right? Because the way that they recruit, I mean, not sorry, that's an overstatement, but they are a blue chip football program that has enough talent to physically be on the same field as Georgia. If they look like they can't, then it's like, all right, Dabo, is this strike three? I mean, like you have
well,
not you've taken three strikes right down the middle in terms of the transfer portal. You just watched them go by, you know.
that's the thing. Their over-one throw is 9.5, and to be honest, with this schedule, you're looking at Georgia. You're not gonna be favored in that game at Florida State. Probably not gonna be favored if by any in that game. NC State, you got to beat. Like, you can't have any of the slip ups. And the problem is with this Clemson team in the past couple of years, they've had some slip ups in games they should not have lost.
Virginia
I'm much
Tech
different this year.
in Blacksburg.
Yeah, you don't think they're gonna be
That's pretty
robbed?
scary. Like that's
Absolutely.
pretty scary. And say like they're in a barn burner with Louisville and they're like, oh, what a great win. What a great win against a good Louisville team. Only to walk into Blacksburg the next week and watch Kyron Jones put up a Heisman performance.
Well,
Just
enter Sandman. Yeah, that's not an easy place to play at all.
absolutely. Wow, the next sketch that I wanted to highlight, I put this one on here because it is unique to every other schedule in college football this year. You can see the asterisks next to the verses. Like if you're watching on YouTube. Now, if you listen on Spotify, we love you. Okay, maybe come on one of these days you can check us out on YouTube. Check out our graphics. Say hello. Subscribe, do all that. But guess what? The asterisk there means Ryan Field is being demoed right now. It's being torn down, and they're building an entirely new one, and it's not going to be ready until 2026. In fact, they got delayed on tearing it down. But yeah, just know it's not going to be ready. It's not going to be close to ready. So they're going to have to play neutral site games for every single home game that they play. Now, is Soldier Field kind of like a home game? I guess. Pretty close. But I don't know that they're going to be able to play in Soldier Field. They've already talked about having for the Wisconsin game. They're going to have to play in Lambeau. That's that is not a home game. That is a road game if I've ever seen one. So I'm it's crazy. And this isn't even mentioning like the opponents either. Like you're out of conference is Miami, Ohio, who returns a lot of talent on that team that just won the MAC, by the way. You're gonna have to play that at the neutral site game week one. Okay. Duke, sure you lost Mike Elko. Oh no. They could still have a pretty decent team. I
And
haven't done all the research. Yeah,
Malik
Malik
Murphy
Murphy
looks great
there.
so far.
Yeah. Still got Jacquez Moore. Stud. You're gonna lose Grant Barton on the offensive line there, so we'll see. And you lose your offensive line coach Adam Cushing, so we'll see how good the offensive line is there, because it has overperformed the last couple of years, due to him. But then Eastern Illinois, no big whoop, right? Washington, okay, which could be a pretty good team this year. They
At
lost a lot.
Washington, too. It's
At,
not easy to go across the country there.
that's what I'm saying. It's at Washington. You also get Iowa at Iowa. Like we talked about Wisconsin at Lambeau, Ohio State, what you thought was going to be a home game, and you hope that in November there you're like, oh, let's get a little early snow, a mud it up, a little CJ Stroud muddy up game. Nope, you're not going to get that. It's a neutral site game. I mean, it could be played at Soldier Field and could get muddied up, but point still stands. It's not a home game, true home game. Michigan and then also Illinois. I mean, this is just a tough schedule, man. Like, not only are the opponents on there tough because you draw Ohio State and Michigan and Washington and Iowa, you don't get a single home game. You don't get a single true home game. That's nuts.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, how much of a home field advantage is Kyle Field for Northwestern? I
Or
wouldn't say a
Ryan
ton,
Field,
but
Ryan Field.
I'm sorry, Ryan Field. I did not just compare Ryan Field to Kyle Field. Anyways, uh, for Ryan Field for Northwestern, the reality still is like there's a comfort level. to playing in your own building, right? To going over on campus, having some buzz around campus, right? Even though it is Northwestern, it's still gonna be different. You got to travel out to Lambeau. That's what we know of. We don't know exactly what these other games are gonna be playing for. There's a reason why Vegas attributes home field advantage to be on the point spread because it matters. It matters. Not only is the schedule not easy, like you mentioned, like you walked through, but it's just that much tougher every week getting on a bus and going somewhere. Every week having a hotel, whatever it is, like that's not easy. That's not easy. And for Northwestern, that massively overachieved a year ago, right? And credit to that staff and everything they did, and very happy for them because they deserved it. But you lose Ben Bryant, right? Who was
Who
frisky as ever in year seven
wins
of the
games? He wins games.
you got to replace Bryce Gallagher. But other than that, like to me, like this is a chance for Northwestern to continue to take another step forward. But then all of a sudden, yes, it's like one step forward, two steps back, and then you got another step back with the I love the renovations. I think it was long overdue. I love that they're kind of a brand new facility, right? All these nice
Right
things.
after Pat Fitzgerald leaves, too. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
but in reality, like in the short term, it's brutal. And the same reason why we thought about putting Kansas, the Jayhawks, on this list because their schedules, their stadiums being remade, and they're gonna have all these neutral site games on Arrowhead and all that good stuff. And like, it still matters. It's still hard and all this stuff. And it sucks for these players to not have their senior year being played at their home stadium. But Northwestern will adapt. But reality is, it's still gonna be tough. They return. They're sixth in returning production. Right, they're first defensively in returning production. Right, this
Yeah,
is
I
a year
mean,
to take a step forward, another step forward, and building on the momentum of last year. But it's just tough and unfortunate that you have the timing of the renovations.
yeah, no Bryce Gallagher, but in his place, you're throwing in Mac Uline in there, who was one of their highest rated recruits in the last couple of years, coming out of Lake Forest High School there. I mean, you got to believe that you still have something there at linebacker. So, like you said, I don't know. We'll see. This will be a frisky team, but it'll come at a cost, not having to play, not getting to play your home games at home. So,
No, and listen, we like David Braun, right? We
yeah,
we, we love David Braun.
he
Root
shut
for him.
my ass up.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, don't roll back the tape right now, but the things that we said about this program back in July and August were not quite heinous, but it was, I mean, he let us know. He
we
gave us the
got
business.
yeah, and he did it to everyone. To everyone, it was awesome for
Yeah.
Northwestern and the Big Ten and all that good stuff. But right? In a year, they're over on until it's 5.5, right? And do you see them making a bowl with this game? Where I see one game that I firmly believe that is a win, right? Even Miami, Ohio, neutral site, they return. They're ninth in returning production. Miami, Ohio, they're 10. That's the team that won the MAC last year and gave everyone hell that they played, right? And I don't know. I mean, I see a bowl game. They're gonna pull it out of their hat. I know it's early, and a lot can change in the spring off season portal, but you lose six guys to Power Five schools in the portal. That's still not easy to deal with, even if you're Northwestern.
I agree. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Let's talk about Wisconsin's schedule next year, which is more instead of the weird dynamic, you know, uh, that Northwestern has. This is just a team that's playing against very good teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're playing against Alabama and you're out of conference, which is now your other two out of conference, Western Michigan and South Dakota. Big whoop. Okay. Win those ball games. Alabama and you're out of conference. And then in conference, you play Oregon, who quite possibly might be the best team in the Big Ten next year.
Yep.
You play Penn State, you go to Iowa, which for all we know is that game could be the night game. It could be. I haven't looked at Iowa's schedule, but it could be. Could because
And
there's no more Big Noon kickoff anymore, right? So hopefully Iowa gets to pick a better
I think they're still on. They still have Fox. It's Fox, CBS, NBC. There's a bunch of networks that still have the Big Ten,
okay.
so
All
they can
right.
have their pick as
Anyways, and
well.
then USC, you play USC at USC. Uh, Rutgers is no slouch. Nebraska's no slouch, and both those games are on the road. I mean, if Wisconsin wants to hit their win total, they got to beat Purdue at home. Obviously, you win your out of conference games that are not Alabama. You got to beat Northwestern, which is basically a home game, right? It's not kind of nice that game's getting played in Lambeau, most likely. Then you got to beat Minnesota at home, which they've struggled the last 3 years. I mean, they won last year, but uh, it's possible for PJ Fleck's Minnesota team that also returns a lot of talent to go ahead and win in Madison. He's done it before.
Yeah. No, to me, like I look at this, and the reason why it's on here, we talked about like again, hard out of conference game, Alabama, right? And this is going to be a massive environment. First of all, I think, I don't or I do think Wisconsin Stadium is going to be fuming, or very fired up for that game. If you're a diehard Wisconsin fan, you remember about 10 years ago, you played Jay Coker and Derrick Henry, right? That was that Alabama team, and it did not go well for you. But you get a chance to kidnap their home stadium. You think they're down with Kalen DeBoer coming in, a lot of transfers out, some transfers back, which eventually we'll talk about. But yeah, I don't think this is easy. And then in conference, there are some teams that I just don't want to play this year. I do not want to play Rutgers this year at Rutgers. I do not want to play Iowa this year at Iowa. I do not want to play Nebraska this year at Nebraska. Like
No,
sneaky teams that Wisconsin typically has the edge on, right, talent wise, are teams that I do not want to play this year. Whether they're returning crazy production, whether it's tough to go on the road and win there, new coaches that are getting established there with Nebraska, and then yeah, I mean Minnesota, not going to be easy in a rivalry game and a team that was the worst PJ Fleck team you had in probably 7 years since he's been there, and then obviously you mentioned the big guys in Oregon and Penn State. Oh, by the way, don't forget at USC, right? And another team coming in from the Pac-12, and who knows what the quarterback situation is there and how they're doing there, but they seem to be doing pretty good defensively recruiting wise. So early returns on that Anthony Lynn and that staff there is pretty good. Yeah, I think this is very valid, very justified to be on a schedule. And Luke Fickell, who typically sees a big jump in year two, and a lot of people are high in Wisconsin, and I am long term for this program, absolutely. But in year two, again, we talked about with Northwestern, you want to keep building momentum, but then you get a brutal schedule, and it's like, damn, tough to have that. But you know what? I'm sure they're excited for it. They're bringing back 20th from turning potential. That's pretty darn good. Upper quarter of college football.
yeah, but guess what? They play 5 teams in the top 20 in returning production. So
Yep.
like, yeah, sure, Wisconsin returns a lot of production from last year's team. You know, have they figured out the quarterback position? They'd like to think so. I don't know that Tyler Van Dyke is the guy,
We
but yeah,
will have to see on that.
there's a lot of teams that they play on the schedule that A, have their quarterback situation figured out, or B, just are returning a lot of talent. So, um, and we'll see. I mean, Oregon, they're transitioning quarterbacks. Dylan Gabriel will be good. Dante Moore is fine as well. Alabama, we'll see who plays quarterback there. Whoever they trot out there will be fine. USC has a quarterback battle against 2 giants. I mean, Penn State has their quarterback situation figured out. I mean, Minnesota may have the best quarterback on their team that they've ever had in the last 20 years, quite possibly. Unless you want to count Tanner Jones' 1 year as his or sorry,
Tanner Morgan.
Tanner Morgan, just take that 2019 year and just expand it, make that his entire career. Then that is the best quarterback that Minnesota's ever had in their history. But yeah, this is a tough schedule for Wisconsin for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Nevada. And like, so we talk about having tough schedules for having tough out of conferences, which this does check the box relative to Nevada, right? And then you also talk about having tough in conference matchups, which, yeah, they do, like relative to the schedule because they're from the Mountain West, okay? But also, unique circumstances are also what play into tough schedules. This is a 13-game schedule, 13-game schedule. Because you're looking at this graphic right here, and you're like, okay, I only see one bye. You're like 13 games. You're like, oh, but there's a week 0 game. So where's the second bye? Well, it's right in between week 11 and week 13, right there between Boise State and Air Force. That is a tough way to end your schedule, man. You have 7 straight games, and then you get a bye, and then you play UNLV at UNLV. That's nuts, dude. This is we haven't even talked about out of conference yet. If you're listening on Spotify, you haven't even heard us mention these teams. If you're looking at the screen on YouTube, you can see that it's SMU. Who, by the way, it's a Power 5 team right now. Don't know if you knew that. Troy, who, yeah, sure, no more John Sumrall, but Jared Parker. Look, they always have talent in Troy. All right, since they've been in Division I football, they've had talent there, and
Mm-hmm.
bigger, more physical guys. They could be pretty good this year, uh, relative to like some other P5 teams that you could play. Georgia Southern, yeah, they're going to lose a ton of guys. I I don't know how good what's his name is there. Clay Helton. I don't know how good he actually is as a coach there, but oh well. Say you win that game, right? and you go at Minnesota, right? Which it's a Power Five school. It's a Big Ten school. That's not a game you're
You're,
expected to win.
you're going to be double-digit dogs on that game and on the road, right? That's not going to be easy.
Absolutely. And then just this stretch here, like you were playing the best Mountain West teams that you could possibly be playing,
Hmm.
in my opinion. Like, except you miss on Washington State.
The
That's it.
only
That's
and you're avoiding going to Wyoming because nobody wants to do that.
yeah. It's yeah. If you're a Mountain West fan, you know that going to Laramie is absolute trouble. So San Jose State, who was nuts last year, by the way, if you don't remember. Now they don't have Brent Brennan there anymore. Cordiero's gone as well, but I believe Kerry Robinson comes back as well. Plus, uh, they got a nice receiving core over there as well. It should be pretty decent. Oregon State, who's essentially a Power Five team. Fresno State, which is as P5 as G5 teams get these days. At Hawaii, which yeah, sure, Hawaii, Timmy Chang, whatever you want to say about him. At Hawaii, you got to travel. You got to fly to Hawaii. That's tough, right? Colorado State, which I am a believer in Jay Norvell there. I think he's got something cooking over there. I think they could be pretty good this year. You play them, you go to Boise State, who, by the way, has Malachi Nelson now. Like, what are we talking about here? That's nuts. Air Force, we know that they're just Troy Calhoun's got his boys firing over there. And then UNLV with Barry Odom. So it's like, it, this is a tough schedule. You pointed this out to me the other day, and then I went and took a look at it, and I was like, wow, you're right. This is a gauntlet schedule for a Mountain West team, I believe.
Especially coming off a new coach, Jeff Choate, right? A guy
Yeah,
that
I didn't even say
got,
that.
got a got a big deal in terms of Nevada standards for him to come over from Texas and to be their head coach, and they were looking to build some momentum and get back to the glory days. But the reality is, like you mentioned, that back half of the stretch. And the thing is, if you're Nevada, we talked about it on our video, like you have to win your rivalry games, and especially in conferences, it doesn't matter out of conference, take the check, take the losses, right? Bud Elliott loves to say that, and that's reality for a program like Nevada. You need to keep funds coming into your program, so you're gonna go to Troy, you're gonna go to Minnesota, and you might lose those football games in conference where you got to make up that strides. And to be honest, that back half of the schedule is brutal. Is brutal. Hawaii and Colorado State are the only teams that you feel the best about, right? And you mentioned Timmy Chang. I love Jay Norvell, right? Those are not easy wins at all. And by the way, Jay Norvell coming home to Nevada, where he used to coach as well, Mountain West. So the dynamics are brutal at Hawaii is tough to do, tough to travel to, tough to win there, adjust, and then come back. And you're gonna have some jet lag, you're gonna have some fatigue on that plane ride, and then you gotta gear up and play Jay Norvell. Like to me, that's a brutal stretch. It's a recipe for disaster. Year one for Jeff Choate, who's trying to build a culture, trying to bring together a good coaching staff, which we talked about, which I do really like. But you also like to make a bowl game, and the schedule in year one is not ideal. Is not ideal. And obviously, we talked about Oregon State coming in, Mountain West, not making it easier for a program like Nevada to make a bowl game.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's inheriting a team that has gone 2-10 in the last 2 years. And it now I was looking at some beat writers there that are more in tune, more plugged in this program than we are, right? And of course, all the beat writers are going to be optimistic, right? Because they're letting these beat writers come into their practices in the spring. I believe they just had a scrimmage last Friday, and there were some good things to write about there. Yeah, I mean this is a gauntlet. It's hard to find it's hard to find more than 3 wins on this schedule. It really is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about UMass. UMass. Now, you look at this schedule, you're like, well, what are they in the MAC? Not yet. 2025, UMass will be joining the MAC conference, but I'm pumped that we get a head start. We get a preview. Dude, when I found out that UMass was going to the MAC, I was so pumped because they are
This is
like,
awesome.
they just radiate Maction Tuesday night energy. They just radiate Tuesday night Maction energy. So I was fired up about that. But they're playing some pretty dang good teams for the MAC. They're not playing the Kent State, Kenny Burns coming off
Oh,
pretty
oh,
rough
oh,
year for him. He'll bounce back,
he'll be back.
hopefully.
He'll be back. He'll be back.
He'll be back. You're not playing Ball State. Yeah, I mean you're playing Toledo, you're playing Buffalo, who came off a pretty decent year, and you're playing Miami, Ohio, NIU, who was pretty good. Now no more Rocky Lombardi, but NIU was pretty good there.
let me throw in Chris Creighton and Eastern Michigan. That's a team nobody wants to play. Nobody wants
Yeah,
to play them.
yeah. I mean, you get them at home, which is nice, which is nice. So, so they're still playing an independent schedule, right? And they're out of conference, if you want to call it that. It's all out of conference, but if you want to call the games that are not MAC games out of conference, sure, they play two teams from the Northeast Conference, Central Connecticut and Wagner, right, which are not, Division One teams. Um, but the rest of their schedule is pretty brutal. UConn, it's a rivalry, and you also got Georgia, Mississippi State, Missouri, Liberty. I mean, those are four out of conference teams that you do not want to play. And that's 0-4 right there. For a team like UMass, that's 0-4. You have no hope of winning those games. You will take the checks gladly, gladly, but you have no chance. No chance. And I'll say that they also have no chance against Toledo, and I'll say that they have no chance against Miami, Ohio. So it's like, where are you going to get the wins? It's going to be Wagner in Central Connecticut. Hopefully. I don't know, you know, tit from tat between those two teams. Hopefully you get those two wins. Maybe you squeak one out against Eastern Michigan, Buffalo. Maybe you get one against UConn. Like, this is a team that hopefully your floor is 2 wins, but like it's hard to see anything above 4 wins, which 4 wins is a luxury for UMass. Let's be real.
Yeah, I do think I think they've got a little better chance to get around bowl eligibility than you do. But in reality, the statement still stands. This is a tough schedule. Everything's relative, right? I get it. They don't have a brutal conference gauntlet, if you will say it, but they're playing. You mentioned like Missouri, Mi- wow, Missouri at Mississippi State at Georgia. Like that's not easy. And Liberty is significantly more talented. Liberty's going to be like double digit favorites on the road at UMass, and there's nothing UMass can do about it. You mentioned the tough games, on the road against the MAC teams. That's not easy. We like what Pete Lembo's doing at Buffalo, and obviously Chris Creighton at Eastern Michigan. Like this is a tough schedule, and you mentioned they're going to the MAC. You might as well get your feet wet early. But I mean,
I
I'm
love
looking at
it.
the
I love that. I love that.
I'm looking at the MAC standings, and like it's not what you want to. You do not want to be seeing these teams every year if you're UMass, and it sounds like you got them early, so you might as well, give yourself a fighter's chance. But you don't bring a ton back in production. Actually, I'm sorry, you do. You're 11th. You're
Well,
11th.
yeah, a lot of the returning production though, like dude, they're getting like I think their transfer portal class is pretty sneaky. I think it's pretty sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you
Yeah.
got Fomanshan,
Oh,
Fomanshan,
yeah. Tyson. Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of a
the
baller as
Clemson transfer.
well.
I mean, he was there last year and he did fine, but uh, I think their transfer portal class is kind of sneaky. They got a lot of guys that I think are okay. And like, look, if Tyson doesn't work out, they got the Akron guy, Ryan Jankowski. I mean, I have no idea if he's any good, but he's from Florida. He's experienced in action. 6'3", 215. Gosh,
All
I
you
can't
can
wait to
ask
read more.
for.
I can't wait to read more about UMass from these beat writers and check out these quarterback battles, all these position battles. What are these guys actually doing in practice? These transfer portal guys. Seems like seems like they're pretty good. Seems like they're pretty good. So I don't know. Hopefully it works out for them. I like UMass. I like rooting for them. Uh, I did bet against them though week 1 this year, and I was like their 1 win.
Yeah, they
Like that
went
was like
three
their
and nine,
or 3-9.
and
Like
they
and it
bullied
was
New Mexico State. It ended up being really, really good in the
a New
Conference
Mexico State
USA.
team that went 10-2, and I was like so high on this New Mexico State team, and then I just got obliterated. Took a -6.5. I could not believe that. That's just kind of variance that we were dealing with this year in Dawson Steiner, but it is what it is. Let's
By the
go
way,
Minutemen.
I do believe the UMass is good joining the MAC conferences they used to be a part of, which will be fun for them and the old rivalries in that conference. But also, like historically, this team not made many bowl games, right? It's been tough, and this could be the year for Don Brown, right? I know it's a tough schedule, but we're rooting for UMass, and
If they made a bowl game with this schedule, that would be nuts. That would be nuts.
you should get early MAC Coach of the Year since he wouldn't be
Uh,
playing like five MAC.
legitimately, legitimately. Let's talk about South Carolina's schedule now. Uh, I mean, what do we say? Tough out of conference. Check. Well, really, just Clemson, but it's a
At
check.
Clemson.
At Clemson, that's a check, right? That's a tough game. And then you go through a stretch here where you play Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma, and two of those games are on the road back to back. Alabama and Oklahoma are on the road. Then you get a bye and play Texas A&M. It's like you have not had a lot of success playing against Texas A&M as a program in the last 10 years. I believe they're like 1-9. Not to mention, you play at Kentucky, who you would hope is like a winnable game in the SEC, but it's on the road. LSU, still a lot of question marks there, but it's going to be a team that's a lot more talented than you are. Then Missouri, which is a team on the up and up, obviously. I mean, they just loaded in the transfer portal. They did really well last year. They still return a lot of talent. Going to be one of the favorites. Uh, I say one of because there's probably like 6 or 7 teams that you can consider for winning or making to the SEC championship game. But this is a tough schedule to me when I look at it up and down. Sure, let's get a win at Old Dominion or versus Old Dominion. Let's get a win at Vanderbilt. Let's beat Wofford. Let's beat Akron, right? But beyond that, so you win those 4 games, you gotta find 2 more wins to get the bowl eligibility. And there's some tough teams on the rest of the schedule, man.
Yeah, it to me it's a very interesting team. They lose a couple big time NFL talents. They really got a guy people are super high on, Trey Knox, Spencer Rattler. You know how you feel about him. But I thought he was pretty darn invaluable to this team, especially last year where he was about the only on the
Invaluable.
offense. That was and everyone loves Lenora Sellers and the South Carolina staff, and I'm high on him too. I do think it's going to look a lot different. It's going to look a lot different, and I have also no idea. The guy's a redshirt freshman. He's gonna be thrown into a starting job with this schedule. Not ideal. Yes, you bring in like 20 transfers or Raheem Sanders. You fix the O line, kind of. You bring in a bunch of guys to try to fix it. Jared Brown, who I love Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina. Guy's a legit NFL player, so he'll be nice for you. But you also lose 23 some guys, and there are some guys going to legit high major programs, and that's not tough. That's not nice for South Carolina,
Yeah.
who comes in with a schedule that's already going to be tough, and then they just get screwed by the SEC luck because every couple of years you're going to have an SEC schedule where it's just brutal. It is absolutely brutal. And at Vandy is the when you circle and you're like, okay, we got one win in the SEC, hopefully, right? Not to count Vandy ever, but damn, man, a lot of winnable games. You'd like to be scheduled in that middle to bottom tier of the SEC, like Arkansas, like Mississippi State, right? Even Auburn, who I'm getting higher on, Florida, right? At Kentucky, I guess you kind of consider Mark Stoops had him humming past couple years. It's a tough schedule. It's a very, very tough draw for Shane Beamer, who we love and who's getting better and better at South Carolina. But the schedule, another year of another brutal schedule, and it doesn't matter how good you are, but your win loss record doesn't show it. And now your boosters are upset and you're on the hot seat and you can't recruit and you can't bring in talent and then you're fired. And it's a cycle for South Carolina that I hope they realize that Shane Beamer is the guy right there, but it's going to be tough. And we'll see how they do in the schedule. But I mean, you're trying to make a bowl game and I don't know, man. I mean, you see 3 to 4 wins and then you got to buy some wins against teams you're probably going to be a more than a touchdown dog against. And most of them on the road.
Yeah. If this offensive line can do something, I know they got some guys in transfer portal, but like in the SEC, especially in the Big Ten, like relying on the transfer portal heavily for your offensive line is a pretty dangerous game of roulette. Ask Auburn last year, right? So, and Lenore Sellers isn't exactly the most mobile guy over there at 6'3", 240 pounds. Absolute,
He's a dual threat guy. He's a very dual threat guy. But in terms of quick agility, I don't know if it's there.
like pocket mobility, like at 240 pounds, is he that mobile? I mean,
Well,
I don't know. Maybe he's a straight line guy,
you can be KJ Jefferson type mobile where you could just shrug
I
off
guess.
first round NFL draft pick Dallas Turner and still make a nice little throw. But he's also 19, 20 years old. Like it's gonna be tough when you got these big grown men breathing down your neck.
Yeah. Or it's gonna be a good thing, Maybe he's just like so big that they just melt off of him. And he's just
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, yeah, hopefully he's a good guy or a good quarterback option for them. Staff seems to love him. He's gonna have options at receiver. I mean, Gage Laverdane, transfer from Miami of Ohio, Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina, Nicholas Harbor, who talking about being a rising star, stud. So, and obviously Rocket Sanders, a running back. So I mean, on offense, in terms of like your weapons around you, you're gonna have some pretty talented, get some pretty talented folk there, you
And
know.
by the way,
And
not to
Brady
mention,
Hunt, by the way, from Ball State, very good tight end the transfer. I don't even know if he's gonna start, but sorry, what did you
yeah,
say?
not to mention our Old Dominion, right, is top 10, top 6 in returning production offensively, and they're top 22 nationally. And I'm not gonna say it. I'm just saying like these things add up, right? It would be nice to get Lenore Seller's feet wet before you got to go play in what feels like a must-win game in week 2 against Kentucky, right? And but instead, who knows what's gonna happen there week 1?
I mean, Jason Henderson, isn't he? He's out of eligibility.
I mean, who knows, man? Who knows? I'll
I
look it up
mean,
here real quick.
Jason Henderson. I mean, you can't have a good Old Dominion team without Jason Henderson. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's just these are rules. I don't make them up. I just follow them. But I'd imagine that he's been there forever. He's got to have been there 4 years. Has to have. He was just 2021, so 2021 to two, so he's played 4 years. Yeah, so I think he's done. He's out of eligibility.
He
So
was a junior in 2023.
what? Did he redshirt 1 year?
No, 2021 is freshman year, 2 sophomore year. So 2024 will be his senior year. I don't I don't see
Oh,
anything.
2024 will be a senior.
No.
So I guess he declare? I don't even know. I don't even know. These are things that I should know. I don't
Yeah,
know. But
2025
anyways,
scout. Yeah, no, he's back, which is
oh, that's nuts.
not a
All
good
right,
sight
I'm
for any
back on the Old Dominion
Kansas.
train. I'm already
Yeah,
back.
there it is. It's that easy. It's that easy.
It's that easy. Let's talk about Purdue. This is a schedule that's tough because of the names that are on it, dude. Notre Dame, Oregon State out of conference, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. I mean, come on. What are we doing
Not
here? I
not
mean, that's a tough
ideal.
schedule. And your buys are early too. Like you get a week 2 buy and then a week 9 buy, and then you got to go play Ohio State and Penn State along with 3 other schools the 5 following weeks after that. It's like,
5 games in November is not ideal, especially coming after playing 6 games in a row like that. What are we doing, Purdue, mate? Purdue schedulers. Not only yes, you get a bye week too, but you go on what must be it's 11 out of 12 weeks playing Power 5 schools. That's brutal. That's brutal. And don't tell me Oregon State's not a Power 5 school right now. They still are. They're in the Pac-12 technically, and they're still pretty talented there. They're returning a couple key players on that team, and it's in Corvallis, which is not easy to play. And you know they're going to be fired to play because they don't have a ton of key teams playing in Corvallis this year, and Purdue's one of them, another Power 5, Power 4 school, I guess. And obviously, they're going to be fired up and buzzing to play that game.
yeah, Mike Babinski was so locked in on his Purdue basketball team making a natty run. He forgot that he scheduled, forgot that he didn't fight for, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, Purdue's AD feels like he dropped the ball on this one. But uh, actually, to be honest, I don't really know how Big Ten scheduling works. I would imagine that the 80s at least have some say, but I don't know. Do you have any insight on that? Like how they actually make the
When
schedule?
well, it's been changing. I do know that they did gather for it. I'm sure there's some kind of algorithm they can spit it into. But in terms of when you get your buys, you can you could probably ask for that. And I know like the other Big Ten teams we've talked about have had later buys. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a tough schedule. Ryan Walters. I thought he actually overperformed my expectations last year. Again, they didn't really play all that well. I thought Hudson Card was better than I thought he was going to be. I don't think he necessarily played up to his full potential, but this is just a tough schedule. Like, what are you going to do about it? You're out of conferences, Notre Dame and Oregon State. Yeah, okay, Indiana State, sure, go win that ball game, right? But then like overall, man, like it's a tough draw in the Big Ten here when you draw Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. Draw all 3 of those, plus Wisconsin, Illinois are on the road. Plus, like you're four of four of your probably 5 most winnable games are on the road. I mean, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana. I guess if you call Nebraska a winnable game too, I guess. So was it 4 of 6? Whatever it is. I mean, the tough dynamic here, dude. It's a tough dynamic here for Purdue. I don't love the
You-
schedule for them, man.
To me, I'm seeing 5 teams that are going to be probably power rated in the top 20, and that is brutal. And a couple of those games on the road, and then even you mentioned like your winnable games, Illinois, Indiana on the road, and that's kind of not a good recipe. That's a recipe for disaster for Ryan Walters in year 2, who, like you mentioned, quietly a little bit more impressed than I thought I was going to be, especially with the development on the offense side of the ball. I think defensively was always going to take a little bit of time. Losing Nick Gordon is brutal, is absolutely brutal. I know you as an Aggie love that for you guys, but you bring in some guys from Georgia. Never a bad idea. Nyland Green, right? A couple other guys defensively, and you're trying to bring in better athletes and longer guys to fit this Brett Bielema, Ryan Walters scheme to really get after it and to run and gun. I think it's probably another year away from really working out. You lose a couple stud wide receivers in the portal. It's been probably more going out than coming in, which is not ideal for you. But you got Maccabee back, you got Reggie Love coming over from Illinois, I believe, and
Hmm.
yeah, Hudson Card in year 2 in the offense. We'll see how it goes. But reality is this schedule is brutal. It's brutal, and Notre Dame is going to be a top 10 power rated team. Oregon State is brutal on the road. Nebraska is everybody's sweetheart in the Big Ten right now, and obviously, who knows what Michigan State's going to be year 1, Jonathan Smith. And your rival in the Oak and Bucket game at Indiana is not going to be awesome, especially after 4 games of playing tough Big Ten football in November, right? The reality is like this is not set up for Purdue successful season, making a bowl game and all this stuff. Their over and win total is, I believe, it's 4.5, 5.5, and it's I don't know. I think it's pretty good, but it's also might be too high because at least I don't see it going over.
Absolutely. Yeah, that brutal, man. Absolutely brutal for you Purdue fans. I'm so sorry. The last team that we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about Texas and their 2024 schedule is mostly highlighted by just a couple big names, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not necessarily like, in terms of like an SEC draw, they actually drew pretty well, right? You get Mississippi State, you get Arkansas, and you get Vanderbilt. Like, those are probably 3 of the best draws you could get, right? But playing Michigan and Georgia, and then reuniting your rivalry with Texas A&M on the road, that's tough to me, man. Those are 3 tough games, especially when the expectations are very high. That's tough. And not to mention, obviously, Oklahoma and the Cotton Bowl, right? That's a given. So it's like, I think they have a pretty tough schedule. I think like the Bill Connolly's like SP plus like schedule rankings or whatever, they had Texas in the top 10. I don't know if this is a top 10 schedule. Like I don't know that I would put it up against some of these other schedules. Sorry, relative strength, right? Obviously, Texas is very good. They're in the SEC. Like relative to other SEC schedules, this is both hard and like very hard at very difficult times, but also pretty manageable, if that makes sense. Like between Georgia and Texas A&M, you play Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky. Like that's pretty manageable. It's not like you have like an insanely brutal stretch. Sure, you play Oklahoma and Georgia back-to-back weeks. It's not like you have like any like insanely brutal stretches. But I still believe that this schedule is difficult. If you are trying to make the playoffs, win the national championship, it's hard to draw Michigan and Georgia, man. Both of them.
I mean, it's going to be a great game. As a fan, I'm very excited to watch it. But for Texas, you got to be a little bit upset, in year 1 going to the SEC. But in a year where it's a very popular pick to win the SEC, and especially where divisions don't matter, and all you have to be is the second best team, presumably playing Georgia. You could lose to Georgia week 8 and go turn around and play them and win that game that matters, and then you go and you'll have that first round bye college football playoffs. But this team also loses a ton of talent. I know there's a lot of talent on the roster that are really well in the portal, attacking certain holes and filling them with quality players, proven players in the Power 5 level and in UTSA as well, Trey Moore. But you lose 6 guys, 6 players that are underclassmen declared. That is pretty tough to replace. And guys that, in terms of just when the chain of development happens, and you're expecting these guys to be there for maybe a couple years or whatever it is, and now they're gone. And yes, it's a good thing that they hit and they're freak athletes and that all this good stuff about them. They're going to be great players in the NFL, but it's still tough. It's a tough hit to your depth, especially on that front seven and that D line, where I think they're going to take a step back. And in a year where you're joining the SEC and you're going to be playing these elite offensive linemen, and if you ask me, what's Michigan going to be able to do against you? They're going to run the football and they're going to play good defense, and that's a recipe to beat Texas. It looks like, as we're talking in March 27th right now. But the reality is, yeah, Texas, again, college football playoff contender, and a lot of expectations are on Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian and this team here, and that's not easy. And at Texas A&M, by the way, I can't believe we're not talking more about that. That could be an awesome game. You got Mike Elko Hum in there, and it's a huge rivalry game. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't really know a ton until the Texas kind of returning back to the A&M. It's a big time rivalry. These two schools hate each other. A lot of disrespect thrown around on Twitter and how they address each other, and it's
It's literally
awesome.
in A&M's fight song.
Yeah,
Like the first words are goodbye to Texas University. So
and
long to the orange and white. Like that is literally like the first line of the fight song for Texas A&M.
I'm sawing Marcy's horns off.
Bart, yeah. It is going to be an awesome game, and there's a lot of buzz out of the A&M program too. Like, here's the thing though, with A&M, there's always a lot of optimism, but I think there's like a level of discipline there in that locker room that I think they haven't seen in a while. Plus, like they're gonna be talented, man. They're gonna be talented.
Mm.
So they'll be one of those teams where it's like you don't pick them to win the SEC, but it's a team that you don't want to see them on their schedule, exactly on your schedule. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for
So
sure, especially with the talent level there. But also, I want to ask you this real quick. Like in terms of, I have to ask it. I don't love asking the question because I don't know if I fully believe in it, but I do think it's a pretty interesting question and something I'm going to be looking out for. But like a lot is made of the SEC, you know, the how tough it is to play in the schedule and the gauntlet that it is and the adjustment that it's going to take for Texas and Oklahoma to come in the SEC and compete right away, week in and week out against really physical, really talented players. I think this schedule is kind of conducive to that, where your buys are pretty strategically placed, where you're not playing, four brutal games in a row, three brutal games in a row. You got Arkansas thrown in their week 12. And all due respect to Arkansas, but it's a lot better than playing Alabama in week 12 and then having to go from Florida to Alabama to Georgia, whatever it might be. Do you think there's going to be an adjustment for Texas? Is that something you're concerned about going to the SEC when you're thinking about the schedule and them going forward?
for Texas, I'm not worried about because like they've already proven that they are a physical team. Like I would be more worried about Oklahoma, whose schedule, by the way, is also really brutal, arguably more brutal than Texas's schedule. But I'm not so worried about Texas at all. Like I think they will step in and compete just fine. I think there's a lot of A&M fans that are hopefully like, yes, they're gonna get their lumps, man. They're gonna come to the SEC and get their lumps. But if you remember, A&M came to the SEC and was pretty effective right away. It's just kind of been, a
That's
bit of a
staying at the top.
stretch since Johnny Manziel where they've kind of been struggling, but they also win the SEC West, right? And the division disparity there was also that does play a role, and Texas is not playing in the SEC West, but still, Texas, I don't think will have any problem adjusting to an SEC schedule, particularly this schedule. And that's not to say A&M schedule is any tougher. Like A&M schedule, I think is easier than this schedule because you don't have to play Georgia. They play Auburn, South Carolina in the SEC, LSU, but at home, Mississippi State. You get Missouri, but that's also at home. Arkansas, Florida. I mean, I would argue that Texas's schedule is more difficult than A&M's schedule. So it's like not that matters, but I think Texas will be totally fine adjusting their schedule. Like it's not going to feel like, oh, welcome to the SEC. Now that moment might come in the Georgia game, perhaps, but their first SEC game is Mississippi State, and then they play Oklahoma, who
Who they're used to playing.
we're used to playing, and then you play Georgia, right? And then like really, you have a pretty decent stretch of games where like you should feel like you can win a lot of those: Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky. Um, yeah, the big ones kind of there in the SEC, like of new SEC teams or old SEC teams you'd be playing are Georgia and A&M are really like the two games that they uh got circled there on the back half of their schedule.
Yeah, I do have to mention first of all, real quick, Brian Vincent, ULM, new coach there. We did a video on him. We loved that.
Sneaky.
They're going to be a tough offense to play, obviously, in the middle of that schedule there. But I do want to throw it in there. Jeff Traylor and UTSA. I know that the point spread is going to be pretty massive in that game.
I mean,
And I
Trey
know
Moore is over on
so on Texas, that revenge game for UTSA. They're in the American now. How do we feel about that? Texas? Are you nervous about that? Is there a big rivalry? Being in from San Antonio to Austin is yes, it's in state, but it's still pretty far ways away. How do you feel about that?
like with UTSA in Texas.
Yeah,
I'm not worried about this game for Texas at all. Like, what? I don't know if you ever saw the Army game when UTSA played Army when Frank Harris was out. Like when he did not play, this UTSA team was not as effective on offense.
I
Plus, I
absolutely.
believe Trey Moore transferred to Texas.
Yep, yep.
So you lose your best defensive player, you lose your best offensive player. Their their wide receiver transfer or something like
Tyke
that.
Ogle Kellogg, he's going to the NFL, I believe. Well, he's just out of graduate. He's just out of eligibility. Same with Joshua Cephas. It's Owen McCowan time for UTSA. It's Owen McCowan.
Oh wow, yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting, man. It'll be interesting. So I don't think that will be a problem with them. ULM is historically one of the worst teams like ever. Love me some Bryant Vincent though. Hunter Herring, let's go. Let's get on that train. Uh, Colorado State, I mean, they should be fine, but Colorado State's pretty good. Yeah, I think for Mountain West team, but they should win that game. They'll be favored by 28 plus.
Yeah, last question before we wrap it up here is what's a successful their over one total 10.5, right? What's a successful schedule look like for Texas in year one ACC? Is it doesn't matter make the playoffs? Is that what it is? Or you gotta beat Oklahoma, make sure you beat Georgia, or beat A&M. Like what's that look like for a Texas fan?
If Texas goes 10-2, like there's a good chance they make the playoffs. Like a really good chance.
Absolutely.
So
Especially
like
if they lose, Georgia and maybe at Michigan. And they could still be in the SEC championship game if that's the
yeah,
case. Or
absolutely, because you only have one SEC loss at that point. So I think like 10-2, I would say is successful. I don't think Texas fans will tell you that. I think Texas fans will probably tell you 11-1, like hitting that win total over, like beating Michigan. Like my expectation is that they beat Michigan. I really do believe that they'll beat Michigan. They're better than Michigan next year. They will be, but it'll still be a tough game in the big house. So you can't count Michigan out. It'd be stupid to chalk that one up as a win, but I do think 10-2 is A, reasonable, and B, like you can accomplish all the goals that you have for this season, unless you just have a specific goal of going 11-1 or 12-0. Like, right.
and winning
But
the
like in
SEC.
terms of like
Right.
winning the SEC and making the playoffs and winning the national championship, you could go 10-2 and still accomplish all those things. Now, if you go 10-2, are your chances of winning the national championship going to deplete? Yeah, because I mean, but the chances are you might see Michigan and Georgia there again, or not see them, where they might get beat by I don't know. It's all very interesting, man. It's all very interesting. Goals are relative to each program, but I think 10-2 would be a successful season for Texas with this schedule.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think 9-3, you'd be a little disappointed because then you
I
only have
think
like
in year 4 of Quinn Ewers, I guess year 3 of the Texas Quinn Ewers, I think you have to be disappointed in that. I think 9-3 because you missed the playoffs and you're not even in contention really, or maybe you're I guess that 14th, 13th team there, but reality 9-3, yeah, I think that'd be a big disappointment. And I hate to say it, but we got to save our numbers. Arch Manning, Arch Manning, Arch Manning. uh, I mean, at 9-3, who knows what's going to happen there with the quarterback position? But I do believe in this team. I think this is a really good roster, and I'm excited for them to play this schedule and play these big time programs and have big conference games and meaningful games. It's pretty exciting.
that's gonna wrap it up for toughest schedule in 2024 part two. Thank y'all so much. If you're listening on YouTube, if you like the content, like the video, it's a simple rule that we have here. Very simple. Also consider subscribing if you want to see some more content like this. Please let us know in the comments were there teams that we missed. Because I haven't combed through every single schedule in all of FBS, so there are probably some that we missed that we are not looking at. Please let us know on that. Make sure you guys are tuned in for all this content that's coming up. Spring practices are coming out. I mean, we're gonna start really diving into some teams. Specifically, the spring transfer portal window is gonna be nuts. Believe it or not, you thought it was over. It's gonna be nuts. It will be crazy, and we're here to cover all of that. So make sure you're sticking around. If you're on Spotify, give us a follow, please. Maybe 5-star review. That'd be awesome. Thank you guys so much. CD, anything for us on the way out?
No, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like Matthew said, do all those things and we'll be happy and so will you.
Absolutely. We'll see y'all in the next one.